Sammy found inspiration in a book he read about as a kid his age who made a bet involving eating worms. Little boys are often quite disgusting creatures, but he had no intention of actually following in the protagonist's footsteps. The thought of eating a worm didn't sicken him like it initially did for the fictional boy, although he had turned to his book to report on Monday and quickly moved on to bigger and better elementary pursuits. A few weeks later, Sally Johnson saw him kneeling over at a puddle of a classmate's pool party. A drowned worm laid there, in a splash of water that filled like a shallow footprint in cement. It had almost as a blush hue to it. Perhaps it was maybe heavy from the amount of chlorine of the pool. The little boys didn't care too much about impressing the girls that age, but when they do make that effort, it often has the opposite effect. Of course, it's hard to say what his intentions were when he wandered over to see what he was looking at. "Ew, gross! Don't let it go into the pool," she said, her voice octave higher than usual. A smile somewhere between the mischievous smirk and shy, toothy grin crept on the boy's face. He leaned down and monotonically slurped the worm from the cement petri dish. Sammy then followed up the dirt-dead dread with a loud gulp and swallowed his mouth across his forearm. Sally ran off screaming to her friends who were huddled up by the lounge chairs. Word got around quickly, and by the end of the lunch period that Monday, he had earned 75 cents and 2 garbage pail kids for drinking lumpy curdled concoction. The boys at his lunch table crowded around him with mixed amounts of disbelief, disgust, predolescent respect printed on their faces. Sammy's popularity skyrocketed that day. He soon discovered it was hard keeping his new friends interested. Over the next few days, all the boys and even a few girls in his class watched him eat a couple of juicy worms. A beetle, a slug, a worms. The children's interest poked again, and then the inevitable decline when she ate a Salisbury steak that severely broke all the conventions of the 5-second rule. That he had drummed up nearly $3 in dare and money and a few Kit-Kat knickknacks, just before the novelty and the act had finally faded. His fellow classmates returned to their games of hopscotch, kickball, and foursquare. Sammy scrambled to find something to draw them back. He knew that he needed much of up to the ant, so he scurried around the playground for anything delectable and shocking. He was so anxious to get everyone's eyes on him again, yet he failed to think about the possible consequences of his next move. Sammy shot out of his mom's car, kicked open the backyard gate, and clambered up to this treehouse. Tears began to stream down his face as he padded back and forth around the rickety old fort. It had been the domain of his father and uncle many years, and he was able to scale the ladder and enter the dark and dusty space. Principal Miller told his mother that she was not entirely sure what had gone down and promised to call as soon as she knew more. The children were very upset, so Sammy was to stay home from school until they better understood the situation. Betty had never seen Miss Miller so rattled before. There were rumors she had been none for many years, entering the public education. Betty figured that it could make an old battle-axe liquor flinch to her to be bad. His mother, looking flustered and older than her 37 years, walked back to their yard after her son. "You come down here this instant and explain to me what the hell happened at school. The principal says you ate a rat? It all seems too absurd to be true." "I didn't hear that right, did I?" she asked pleadingly. Sammy stuck his head out of the only window and yelled, "It wasn't a rat! They're lying! They're all lying!" His mother let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God! Well, if it was just a misunderstanding then. It was a baby bird. It didn't have feathers or nothing. It was going to die soon anyway," he exclaimed between sniffles. It took a spring to his mother, his face startled with a split second. She had never seen that look on him like that before. It was the same look of utter disgust everyone at school had leveled him that way when they heard about what he had done. The kids who actually witnessed the act, well, one of them anyway, puked when they heard about the hollow bones of a baby robin crunching between his teeth. The shock of Sammy's words were unsettled to Betty Dawson. She turned away from her son and awkwardly wandered to a few paces towards the patio. The voice of her reasoned head reminded her that she was never fully understood, little boys or grown-up men, for that matter. This was just another one of her son's weird phases, and he eventually moved on past it. She took a deep breath and tried to think of a way to handle the situation. Betty made a move to turn back to her son, but threw her arms up in defeat and said, Just stay up there until your father gets home. I can't even... The bewildered little boy watched his mother retreat to the house, without another word or a glance in his direction. As soon as she was out of sight, his sniffling and sobs turned into flat-out bawling. His foot slashed out the old trunk that had been sitting up in the tree before he was born. A shoot of pain fired up his leg, and he drew back and took another kick at the box. He spun around and had connected with the wall itself instead. A loose plank gave a little, and then kicked back, knocking him on his ass. Sammy rolled into the side in pain, wiped his stream of snot from his face. Then he lay there with a quivering lump for the next few hours. His father didn't come home until well after dinner time, despite Betty calling his office several times. Your son did a horrible thing at school today. He needs his father to set him straight. The all of a sudden flood of car lights washing over the backyard brought the boy to his feet. He looked towards the driveway and saw his father coming after around the car towards the treehouse. Sammy climbed down hesitantly when his father called him. Hey, kiddo, I heard you went out for dinner tonight. Sammy picked at the dry snot from his upper lip. Yeah, Daddy, I got sent home early from school today, but I didn't do nothing wrong. They all lied. Gary picked up his son off from the ladder and sat him to his feet. He squatted down before his son. Yeah, well, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Go get washed up and we'll tuck you in shortly, he said, and tousled Sammy's hair. Okay, kiddo, off you go. Sammy brightened up a bit and rushed to the house. Gary couldn't fathom of what everyone was so upset, but he would soon find out. A little while later, Sammy laid in bed, listened to his parents angrily muttering back and forth. He was certain that they were arguing about him. He didn't want to get what the big deal was, but there was plenty of things people ate that he didn't like. But that didn't bother him. The decision of his snacking to himself from now on formed when he was brushing his teeth. Of course he was going to try new things. He felt like a dauntless explorer cutting his way through the dense jungle in a search of an ancient city that he was excited to see what it was up ahead. He was actually disappointed everyone reacted so badly, less because they were disgusted by him, and more so because they distracted him from properly savoring the delicious little morsel. The taste had been so much better than he expected, but it was squishy yet crunchy texture that left him wanting more. It dawned on him, and his eyelids began to feel heavy, that it wasn't the attention of his classmates that he craved. He fell asleep to the thoughts of what he'd try next, a little dab of saliva soaking into his pillowcase. The next couple of weeks taught Sammy a few valuable lessons. People, especially children, can be cruel. Some precautions are better kept secret. And most importantly, dead things tasted nowhere as good as living things. Bugs were easy to catch, but baby birds didn't fall out of their trees every day. He decided to branch out a bit and find some old mousetraps in the garden shed. Those first few mice were tasty, but they didn't hit the spot like a baby robin did. Something seemed missing. He figured that he just liked birds better than mice until he had discovered a live mouse caught in one of his traps. This excited the boy, watched and frightened the pained creature as it twisted and turned, trying to pull its mangled tail free. He wondered, given enough time, if it would eventually chew off its tail to save itself. The thought intrigued him, but he was too hungry to risk losing the squeaking morsel. He worried about the damage it might do to the inside of its mouth, so he took precautions to avoid that. The poor rodent screamed in pain as he snapped the bones of each of its limbs. The 4 malicious snaps blended with its screeching to create a harmony that was better than song Sammy had ever heard. He decided to go to a different route, but was glad to discover the wondrous melody. Instead of trying to chew it whole, he bit the head off with one quick, deliberate bite. He instantly praised himself for the spontaneous action as warm blood gushed over his tongue and trickled down his throat. The boy made a trip to the library the next day and signed out some books of live trapping animals, being careful not to alert anyone of his activities, especially his parents. He scrounged around the garbage and garden shed for tools and materials. It wasn't long until he realized a knack, an almost intentional ingenuity for building things. Time has passed when Sam settled into his new reality. He kept to himself at school, played the part of odd but good son, and delved further into his hobby for his free time. He eventually ventured beyond eating bugs and rodents. Flyers of missing pets littered the small town. They weren't hard to miss, taped to the storefront windows and stapled to telephone poles. He worried that some people would actually link them to the kid who once ate a bird, but he gave some people too much credit. Sam learned that memories and attention spans tended to be quite as short. Besides that, most people weren't willing to believe that their privacy could live out around the corner. They're just unwilling to pay attention to the sharp reality, staring at them in the face of fear of bursting their bubbles, leaving them naked and invulnerable to a cruel and unforgiving world. Sam had that blind spot, the harmless, nerdy oddball that kept his head buried in his school books that everyone had fooled. No one even batted an eye when he brought the old van. Their pedestrian minds considered the possibility of maybe a little hot smoke rolling out the windows, but never panicked screams for help. He'd always been working on it most of the summer and hoped to have it like a purring kitten by the fall. He was looking forward to college, a new place where no one knew him. He could be ring-fenced to himself, shed the label of the weird kid that ate bugs and brought meat and new people.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.